Perhaps one of the most confusing aspects around the new Marvel's Avengers game is, what kind of game is it exactly? Like, how much of it is single player versus multiplayer? How does the game's progression work? And is it really just Destiny 2 with a Marvel skin on it? This can be rather unclear to the average person if you haven't been keeping up with developer live streams. We got early access to the game's beta, and we're finally starting to get a clear picture. And yeah, it's actually a lot like Destiny. Let's get the biggest question out of the way. Yes, the game does have a single-player campaign. As you play through the campaign, you unlock more of the game's content and features, like new mission types, heroes, and multiplayer. Hero missions are single-player only, and these are where you're going to get most of the game's story and cutscenes. In them, you are given specific heroes to play and do unique missions to continue the game's main story. In the beta, you play as Hulk and Kamala Khan, who enter a secret AIM facility in search of Jarvis. The campaign is a purely single-player experience, and, at least in the beta, the missions are not repeatable. After the completion of a few hero missions in the beta, you go to the Chimera, an Avengers helicarrier and the game's social space. Early on, the Chimera is mostly abandoned, with only Bruce and Kamala there, and the rest is all locked off. Presumably, the Chimera will fill up with more characters and functions as you progress through the game's story. It's essentially the hub where you'll go between missions. Which leads us to the most important part of the Chimera, the War Table, which is how you pick your next objective and access the multiplayer. The War Table is broken up by environmental zones that populate with different mission types. The largest of these missions are called War Zones. These are multi-objective missions where you move across several locations. For example, this war zone in the Pacific Northwest starts you out in an open forest before eventually leading you into a small underground AIM facility. The missions are fairly straightforward, but there are small opportunities to deviate off the main path to find chests, beat up tough enemies, or break into depots for bonus loot. Where war zones are meant to be longer, more involved missions, for those looking for something quick, you have drop zones. These are bite-sized versions of war zones with only a single objective, and they take around 5 to 10 minutes to complete. War zones and drop zones are meant to be repeatable with multiple difficulties. You start to see a lot of repeating environments and objective types, so don't expect these to be as handcrafted as the campaign missions. That said, you will get some more unique war zones, such as Condition Green, where you're recommended, but not required, to play as the Hulk, or ones with a boss fight at the end. There's one more mission type in the beta, and those are the Harm missions. These take place in a combat simulation room aboard the Chimera and are wave-based combat challenges. War zones, drop zones, and harm missions are all multiplayer focused, with options to matchmake or invite your friends. However, you can play everything single player if you want, bringing AI companions with you instead. These AI will use the gear and skills you've acquired for them, so if you decide to play purely single player, you're going to want to maintain levels of multiple heroes. There are 3 progression systems for every hero: character level, power level, and challenge card. Character levels are the most straightforward, as their purpose is to provide you with a new skill point for each level. You then use these skill points to unlock a new skill. Power level is an indicator of your stats. Every piece of gear has a power level on it, and the average of all of them is your power level. If you've played Destiny, then it's exactly like that game's power system. Gear can also be boosted, and with each boost it increases the power level of that gear. Doing so requires using one of the game's several resources, and which resource it is depends on the gear. Uncommon gear can be boosted 3 times, rare gear 5 times, and epic and legendary gear 10 times. Equipment like epic gear will have multiple perks on them, but you'll need to boost it in order to unlock the perks. Last are challenge cards, which are basically battle passes. They go all the way up to level 40, and each level unlocks cosmetics like outfits, nameplates, and emotes, or some extra resources. You earn points towards your challenge card by completing daily and weekly challenges. The challenge cards in the beta don't offer any sort of paid option, with everything being labeled as free, but there is an empty space for what is likely a paid track. And yes, every hero has their own individual challenge card. Based on our time with the beta, this appears to be the core loop of Marvel's Avengers. You have a single-player campaign intermixed with repeatable multiplayer missions, with the Chimera acting as your hub. The progression system seems designed to keep you playing long after the story is finished, but until we get our hands on the full release, it's hard to say what Avengers Endgame will look like. If you don't have access to the beta and want to know how it actually felt to play the darn thing, well, go check out our impressions video with Jordan, Phil, and myself. And for more on Avengers, stay tuned to GameSpot.